Girl falls 10,000 feet from plane and leaves the rescue team speechless. Teenager Julianne Kopka didn't watch her life flash before her eyes as she plummeted 10,000 feet towards dense jungle terrain. That's because she was knocked unconscious, at the complete and total mercy of the storm that put her into that position to begin with. When she came to, somehow alive, a new mission not on her initial travel itinerary crystallized: find mom and find rescue, or die. In 1971, German citizen and respected South American bird researcher Maria Kopka planned a holiday vacation with her 17-year-old daughter Julianne. Leaving from Peru, their itinerary was simple, but it turned completely deadly. Maria planned to meet up with her husband for Christmas, so she booked tickets on the Peruvian airline Líneas Aéreas Nacionales S.A., or LANSA. A time before Yelp and Google reviews, the ornithologist didn't know the airline's reputation. See, during the 60s and 70s, LANSA was the fastest way to travel from one Peruvian city to another. However, despite offering frequent flights, the airline was plagued with fatal mishaps. In 1966, for instance, LANSA Flight 501 careened into a mountain, killing all on board. A few years later, LANSA Flight 502 crashed. Of the 100 passengers, only one survived, and the crash took the lives of 2 more people on the ground. Yet even with its history, LANSA was still the go-to airline. In December 1971, Flight 508 took off from the capital city of Lima. With a small crew and less than 100 passengers, including Maria and Julianne, the takeoff went as planned. But any hopes of a safe trip were dashed just 40 minutes into the flight when the small plane flew into a thunderstorm. Suddenly, a bright light lit up the aircraft. Lightning had struck the fuel tank. The right wing of the plane broke away as passengers let out screams. Christmas gifts and luggage were sent flying into the storm as the pilot lost the last bit of control. The plane nosedived. Julianne and Maria held to each other tight. In an interview with BBC's Outlook, Julianne vividly remembered the crash. Her mother said, "That is the end, it's all over." Then, tragically, her daughter was ripped from her side as Julianne's seat was pulled from the carriage. She flew into the storm before plummeting to the earth. Everything went black. When Julianne awoke, she found herself still strapped to her seat and completely alone. She was alive somehow. It seemed the dense jungle had broken her fall, enough to allow her to survive. She took stock of her injuries. Her collarbone was broken and there were deep wounds along her arms and legs. Even worse, with her glasses lost in the crash, the nearsighted Julianne had to navigate with bad vision. Her first instinct was to locate her mother. Julianne called out, but the only sounds she could hear were that of the jungle. She had to think of a new plan. If she could find help, then maybe they could locate her mother and any other survivors. Wearing only a short sleeveless dress and sandals, Julianne tried to shake away any fears. After all, she'd spent over a year with her family at a research center in the Amazon. She wasn't a stranger to the Peruvian jungles, so she pulled from her knowledge. Because her sight was limited, Julianne used her sandal to strike the ground before her, in an effort to scare away any dangerous creatures. Half blind, she stumbled into the crash site where she searched for any food or water. The only thing she could find were some candies, so she kept moving. After finding a creek, Julianne stayed in the waters and followed it downstream, a safer approach than staying on land. During the day, the sun burned her. At night, she froze, but she had a strong will to live. On the 4th day, Julianne recognized the sounds of a king vulture. She knew from her parents' research that from the predator bird, a large mass of dead flesh was nearby. Julianne was horrified when she saw what the birds had noticed: the crash site. Passengers were still strapped to their seat, but unlike Julianne, the fall had rammed them into the ground, head first. Julianne got close enough to see that her mother was not among them. She continued on, her injuries getting worse. Maggots were all over her wounds, causing infection, and on the 10th day, as she wandered into a river, Julianne questioned her sanity. Up ahead, she saw something that truly didn't make sense. There was a motorboat in the near distance, docked along the riverbank. A mirage, she thought. Who would live out here in the dense Peruvian jungle? As she neared the boat, however, she realized it was very real. Her stomach turned. Did she want to meet the owner? Desperate and nearing death, Julianne investigated. After finding a small path, she found a hut with a gasoline can nearby. She remembered her father had used gasoline on the wound of a family pet once, which gave her an idea. The pain was sharp as Julianne sucked gasoline out of the can and tried to clean her wounds as best as she could. Exhausted, she passed out right there in the hut, unaware she was crashing an occupied home. The next morning, local boatmen discovered her in the hut, bloody, covered in maggots and smelling like gasoline. They were frightened, believing her to be a water spirit from their folk tales. Weak, Julianne talked to the boatmen in the little Spanish she knew. Thankfully, they understood. The men did the best to treat her wounds and after a 7-hour boat ride, brought Julianne to a hospital. When she finally saw her father, they hugged in silence. After a rescue found Maria Kopka's body, Julianne learned her mother had indeed survived the plane crash, but for only a few days. Julianne is still haunted by what her mother's final days must have been like. No one fared well in the Amazon. Julianne kicked her own experience around in her head. Was there something she could have done differently to save her mother?